Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren said today the Mar-a-Lago search unlikely to affect the January 6th committee's work. I want you to take a listen.
It's not at all clear that what was discovered at Mar-a-Lago when this search warrant was executed really has any overlap with the January 6th committee. Our charge is to investigate all of the matters that led up to January 6th, that riot and attempt to overturn the election, and then to make recommendations that would make it much harder to try and overturn an election violently in the future. I think it's theoretically possible that there is some overlap, but at the current moment, I don't think there is.
Ryan, what are you hearing about the implications for the insurrection investigation?
You know, I don't think that there's a ton that we know right now because, of course, they're on a pretty tight time frame here. They really only have a few more months while they're still operable. So, you know, they're going to have these hearings next month in September and lay out a lot of their evidence. But I think that that's just too long of a timeline for them when they could potentially get some of those documents back if they were relevant to this search. I think that that's something that the Justice Department is going to be handling on a much longer basis because obviously these federal investigations can really drag on. But, you know, the committee here is on a very, very tight time frame. The November elections are sort of when they kind of have to start winding it down. And then November, December is like, you know, by the time the new Congress is sworn in, their mission is going to end. So they really do only have really a few more months to their report out.
Jill, help us understand something. Assuming the evidence is solid, under what scenarios would the DOJ not indict Trump?
I think there should be no case in which they wouldn't indict, assuming that the facts play out the way they are, that the evidence is clear as to what has happened. I think that not doing something is a great threat to our system of justice, that if we don't hold people accountable for clear violations of the law, it will only endanger future repetition. It will encourage future repetition. That's why I think it was a mistake not to indict Richard Nixon. If he had been indicted, there wouldn't be a debate about whether a president or a former president could be indicted, and there wouldn't be any debate about whether or not Donald Trump understood that violating the law could lead to indictments, that there is accountability. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't act on it. And of course, if the Congress doesn't flip, and there is a growing reason to think that people are now upset enough, not only about the January 6th events and this recent possibility of what is called espionage, but which really is endangering America through the revelation of state secrets, that may end up with, combined with the Dobbs decision, not flipping the Congress. It may increase the Democratic majority, and then this could continue, the January 6th committee could continue, but in any event, the Department of Justice has 2 more years.